The sharp scent of antiseptic stings my nose before I even reach George's side. He's hunched over a clipboard, fingers tracing numbers and dates like he's solving a puzzle only he can see. My chest tightens when I hear the words they're whispering. Incompetent. Legal guardianship. How could the man who balances our bills, remembers every corner of our garden, and corrects my grammar be doubted like this? I take his hand. He looks up, confused, frustrated, but steady. Then Dr. Amira Patel walks in. She doesn't hurry. She doesn't frown. She simply studies him with quiet patience, like she can signal exactly who he is. And in that moment, something shifts. I feel a fragile hope that maybe we won't have to face this alone. Have you ever watched someone you love be misunderstood and wondered if the world could ever see them the way you do? Stay with me to see how courage, persistence, and an unexpected ally turn doubt into proof, fear into dignity, and confusion into reclaimed strength. The kitchen smelled of coffee and butter, the morning light slanting through the window the way it had for 47 years. George stood at the stove, spatula in hand, humming something tuneless while the eggs sizzled. I was setting out the marmalade, his favorite, the kind with thick rinds, when I heard the clatter. The spatula hit the tile first. Then George's knees buckled. George? He caught himself against the counter, one hand gripping the edge, his face gone pale and slack. His eyes wandered, unfocused, like he was trying to read something written in the air between us. His voice came out slurred. Eleanor, I don't... My heart lurched. I crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, catching his elbow. His weight sagged against me, heavier than I expected, and for a horrible second I thought we'd both go down. Sit. Right now. I guided him into the nearest chair, my hands shaking. He slumped forward, elbows on his knees, breathing hard. George, look at me. He tried. His gaze skittered past my face, then found me again, confused, lost. I grabbed my phone, dialed 999 with fingers that felt too thick. The operator's voice was calm, methodical, asking questions I answered on autopilot while I knelt beside him, one hand on his shoulder. 73. Yes. Slurred speech. Dizziness. No, he's sitting. Please hurry. George's hand found mine, squeezed weakly. Eleanor? I'm here. My throat tightened. You're all right. Help's coming. The paramedics arrived in what felt like seconds and hours all at once. 2 young men in green, polite and brisk, asking George to follow a penlight with his eyes, to squeeze their hands, to tell them what day it was. He fumbled the last one, said Tuesday when it was Thursday. One of them glanced at me. We'll take him in. Likely a TIA, mini-stroke. Standard protocol. Standard. The word felt cold. They loaded George onto a stretcher. I grabbed my handbag, slipped, on my shoes, locked the door behind us without thinking. The ambulance interior was cramped and sterile, all white surfaces and beeping monitors. I sat on the narrow bench beside George's stretcher, holding his hand while a paramedic took his blood pressure for the 3rd time. George's eyes had cleared a little. He looked at me, embarrassed. Bit silly, this. Nothing silly about it. I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. You scared me half to death. Sorry. The paramedic didn't look up. He was writing something on a tablet, his expression distant, professional. I wanted to ask what he was noting, what it meant, but the words stuck in my throat. George's fingers twitched in mine. At the hospital, they wheeled him straight through to A&E. I followed, clutching my handbag like a shield. Nurses moved past in scrubs, voices clipped, eyes scanning clipboards instead of faces. Someone asked George his name, his birthday, whether he knew where he was. He answered slowly, carefully, but I saw the frustration tighten his jaw. A doctor appeared, young, tired-looking, with a stethoscope slung around his neck. He glanced at George's chart, then at George. "We'll keep you for observation," he said. Not unkind, but not warm either. "Run some tests, make sure everything's stable." George nodded. I wanted to ask what tests, how long, what they were looking for, but the doctor was already turning away. They moved George to a curtained bay. I sat in the plastic chair beside his bed, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. His eyes were closed, but I knew he wasn't sleeping. I squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The doctor who came to assess George wasn't the one from earlier. This one was younger still, maybe 30, with a tablet tucked under one arm and a brisk, no-nonsense manner that set my teeth on edge the moment he stepped through the curtain. "Mr. Hartley?" He didn't smile. "I'm Dr. Morrison. I need to run through some cognitive assessments with you." George opened his eyes, alert now. "Of course." Dr. Morrison pulled up a stool, tapped his tablet awake. "Can you tell me today's date?" "Thursday, the 14th of March, 2024. "And where are we?" "Royal Berkshire Hospital. Accident and emergency. Bay 12, I think. Though I didn't check the sign." George's voice carried a faint edge, dry humor, the kind that had always made me smile. Dr. Morrison didn't smile. He made a note. "I'm going to say 3 words. I want you to remember them. Apple, table, penny. Can you repeat those back?" Apple, table, penny. Good. Now, can you count backward from 100 by sevens? George's brow furrowed. He was tired. I could see it in the way his shoulders sagged. But he started. 100, 93, 86. He paused. 79, 72. "And the 3 words I asked you to remember?" George blinked. "Apple, table." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Penny a papa, table, penny key." Dr. Morrison made another note. The scratch of his stylus felt too loud. "Mr. Hartley, who manages your finances?" "I do." "Do you live alone?" "With my wife." George glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "And does she assist you with bills, banking, that sort of thing?" "She doesn't need to." George's voice was steady, but I heard the strain beneath it. "I've been managing our accounts for 50 years. I'm an accountant by training." Dr. Morrison looked up. "Retired?" "Obviously." The word hung there, sharp and defensive. I wanted to reach for George's hand, but something stopped me. Some instinct that told me to stay quiet, to watch. Dr. Morrison set the tablet down. "Mr. Hartley, given the event this morning and some of the gaps I'm seeing in your responses, I'm concerned about your current cognitive function. We may need to consider whether you're still capable of making independent decisions." My stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" George sat up straighter, his face flushing. "I had a dizzy spell. I'm not senile." "I'm not suggesting you are." Dr. Morrison's tone was calm, clinical, patronizing. "But a TIA can affect cognitive abilities. If we determine that you're unable to manage your own affairs, we may need to explore legal measures." guardianship, power of attorney. I know what incompetency declarations are, Doctor. George's voice was ice now. I'm not signing anything. It wouldn't be your decision if we find you lack capacity. The words landed like a slap. I felt my hands curl into fists in my lap. George stared at him. You've asked me a handful of questions and you're ready to declare me incompetent. Do you have any idea? Mr. Hartley, please stay calm. Dr. Morrison stood, retrieving his tablet. I'll be recommending further assessment. Someone will be in touch. He left. George sat frozen, his face pale again, but for 2 bright spots of color on his cheeks. He didn't look at me. I reached for his hand. This time, he let me take it. That was absurd, I said quietly. He thinks I'm losing my mind. George's voice cracked. Eleanor, he thinks he's wrong. Is he? George looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in 47 years of marriage. Fear. Real, raw fear. I couldn't remember that bloody word. Penny. It was right there and I couldn't. You were tired. You'd just had a stroke. You counted backward by 7s, George. Half the people in this hospital couldn't do that on a good day. He didn't answer. I squeezed his hand. My mind was already moving, sorting through what I'd just witnessed. The rushed questions, the dismissive tone, the leap from a few hesitations to talk of legal incompetency. No, I wouldn't accept this, not without proof, not without a fight. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to let some overworked doctor with a tablet and 10 minutes decide my husband's fate. I'd find a way to prove George was exactly who he'd always been, whatever it took. The next morning, I started a notebook. I know how that sounds, like I'd gone paranoid, like I was some sort of conspiracy theorist scribbling evidence in the margins. But sitting in that hospital room, watching George sleep fitfully under those harsh fluorescent lights, I'd made a decision. If Dr. Morrison wanted to question my husband's competence, he'd have to face facts. Real, documented, irrefutable facts. I bought the notebook at the hospital gift shop, a plain spiral-bound thing with a blue cover. Nothing fancy. On the first page, I wrote the date and started listing everything George had done that week. Every bill he'd paid, every conversation we'd had, every decision he'd made. When George came home 2 days later, I didn't tell him about the notebook right away. I just watched and wrote. Wednesday morning, he sat at the kitchen table with our bank statements spread out like he always did on the 1st of the month. His reading glasses perched on his nose, he cross-referenced the paper statement against the online version, then made notes in his ledger. That beautiful, meticulous handwriting he'd maintained since his accounting days. Not a number out of place. I stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, and watched him catch a discrepancy, £2.17, between what the bank claimed we'd spent at the grocery and what our receipt showed. He circled it, made a note to call them. I wrote it down. Eleanor, are you taking notes on me? I looked up. George was watching me over his glasses, eyebrows raised. Yes. May I ask why? I came to the table and sat down, showed him the notebook. 3 pages of observations, each one dated and time-stamped. He read in silence, his expression shifting from confusion to something softer, something that might have been gratitude. You think this will help? He said quietly. I think if that doctor wants to question your mind, he can answer to evidence. George smiled, just a little. You're building a case. I taught English for 30 years. I know how to compile research. He handed the notebook back. I suppose I should be embarrassed. My wife following me around like I'm a science experiment. Are you? Embarrassed? He considered. No. Amused, mostly, and he paused, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. That old habit when he was thinking. Relieved. That you believe me. Of course I believe you. The doctor didn't. I reached across and covered his hand with mine. The doctor was wrong. After that, George knew I was watching. Sometimes he'd narrate his own actions, half joking. Now I'm organizing the recycling by material type, as any competent person would. Or, I'm reading the Telegraph and forming nuanced opinions about foreign policy. Please make a note. But he also started showing me things. His financial spreadsheets, organized with formulas I barely understood. His crossword puzzles, completed in ink. The letter he wrote to our grandson about university choices, full of thoughtful advice and historical context. I documented it all. I also went digging. Our filing cabinet held decades of paperwork, and I pulled everything that might matter. George's old performance reviews from the firm, glowing, every one. Letters he'd written to the council about zoning issues, articulate and precise. His journal entries from the past year, recording books he'd read, thoughts on current events, plans for our garden. I found a letter from 3 months ago where he'd caught an error in our pension calculation and written to the administrator. They'd corrected it, apologized, thanked him for his attention to detail. I made copies of everything. By the end of the week, I had a folder 2 inches thick. Proof, evidence. A portrait of a man whose mind was sharp as ever, whose life was methodical and purposeful and entirely self-directed. I sat at the kitchen table one evening, the folder open in front of me, and felt something shift inside my chest. The doctor's assessment was wrong, not just mistaken, fundamentally flawed. He'd spent 10 minutes with a tired, frightened man and made a judgment that could destroy George's autonomy, his dignity, everything he'd worked for. But I couldn't fight this alone. I needed someone who could look at this evidence and say what I knew in my bones. George was competent, capable, himself. I needed an expert. I just had to find one who would listen. Thursday afternoon, I sat in the visitors' lounge with my folder, waiting for the ward nurse to finish her rounds so I could ask about second opinions. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and anxiety. I'd been coming every day since George's admission, and the staff were starting to recognize me, the worried wife who asked too many questions. You know how some moments arrive quietly, like they've been waiting for you? A woman walked past the lounge, stopped, backed up. She looked at me, then at the open folder on my lap, George's notes visible, his handwriting precise and neat across lined paper. "Those are impressive," she said. I looked up. She was maybe 50, wearing a white coat with a lanyard that read Dr. Amira Patel, neurology consultant. Her expression was curious, not patronizing. That was new. "They're my husband's," I said carefully. "May I?" She gestured to the chair beside me. I nodded. She sat, leaning slightly forward to read without touching. Her eyes moved quickly across George's financial calculations, the notes he'd made about medication dosages, the list he'd compiled of questions for his GP. After a moment, she looked at me. "Your husband is a patient here?" "George Hayes, Ward 7. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. The competency assessment. My stomach tightened. "You've seen his file." "I was asked to review it this morning. I'm covering for Dr. Singh while she's on leave." Dr. Patel tapped the folder lightly. This is his work? From the past. Week. Since he came in. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she stood. Would you bring these to his room? I'd like to speak with him properly. I'd never moved faster. George was reading the newspaper when we arrived. He lowered it, saw Dr. Patel, and straightened a little. Hospital made him cautious now. Mr. Hayes, I'm Dr. Patel. I'd like to run a few assessments, if you're willing. Another one? George's tone was polite, but wary. A thorough one, she said. With your wife present, if that's acceptable. He glanced at me. I nodded. All right, he said. What followed wasn't like the first assessment. That young doctor had rushed through questions like he was ticking boxes. Dr. Patel sat down. She asked George about his morning routine, listened to his answers, followed up with questions that required explanation, not just yes or no. She gave him a series of cognitive tasks, memorizing lists, solving logic puzzles, interpreting proverbs. George answered steadily, precisely. I watched his confidence return with each correct response. Then she handed him a newspaper article and asked him to summarize it. George read it carefully, then explained the main points, the underlying political context, even the rhetorical strategies the journalist used. Dr. Patel made notes. Quiet, focused notes. Finally, she opened my folder, showed George his own financial records. Can you walk me through your budgeting system? He did. Explained how he tracked expenses, reconciled accounts, planned for quarterly bills. She asked about the £2 discrepancy he'd caught. He pulled out his ledger and showed her. When he finished, Dr. Patel set down her pen and looked at him directly. Mr. Hayes, there is nothing in this assessment or in your documented daily activities that suggests cognitive impairment. Your processing speed is appropriate for your age. Your reasoning is clear. Your executive function is excellent. George went very still. Then why? His voice caught. The initial assessment was insufficient, Dr. Patel said calmly. It didn't account for stress, fatigue, or the temporary effects of your stroke. It was rushed. I felt something break open inside me. Relief, yes, but also fury. What happens now? I asked. Dr. Patel looked at me, then at George. Now we document this properly. I'll submit my findings to the medical board and recommend the competency concern be withdrawn. She paused. But you should know, the hospital administrator may resist. There's liability at stake. Will you help us? The words came out before I could stop them. Dr. Patel stood, gathered her notes. Yes, she said simply. I will. After Dr. Patel left, George and I sat in silence. His hands trembled on the newspaper, not from illness, but from what had nearly happened. We can't just wait, I said. Dr. Patel's report will help, but reports sit in files. We need to show them you're competent, every single day. Show who? Everyone. We document everything. Your routine, decisions, conversations. Make it impossible to ignore. George smiled faintly. You want to turn me into an exhibit? I want them to see what I see. We started small. Each morning, George reviewed the hospital menu and calculated nutritional content, calories, protein, sodium. When the orderly delivered breakfast, George asked detailed questions about preparation. The first time, the orderly blinked. The second time, he brought the kitchen manager. George explained why he'd requested steamed vegetables, how he tracked portions to avoid blood sugar spikes. The manager nodded, impressed. Most patients don't pay this much attention. Most patients aren't accountants, George replied. I wrote it all down, every interaction a brick in our wall. In the afternoons, George held open consultations. Staff brought math problems, budgeting questions. A young nurse asked help balancing her checkbook. George walked her through it patiently. Word spread. Soon more staff stopped by. A janitor asked about tax deductions. A physiotherapist wanted mortgage advice. George answered thoroughly, his mind sharp as ever. My notebook grew thick. Mrs. Kowalski visited one evening with flowers. She stayed an hour, asking George's opinion on proposed speed bumps. George laid out pros and cons like a board presentation. Traffic safety versus emergency access, cost-benefit analysis. When she left, she squeezed my hand. He's himself, Eleanor. Completely himself. I added her testimony to the file. By week's end, George's room had become a hub. Staff dropped by to chat. George remembered names, asked about families. He was proving his humanity one conversation at a time. Even the clinical nurses softened. One brought crosswords. Another debated cricket scores during vitals. You're making friends, I said. George smiled. I'm making witnesses. Then the hospital administrator arrived. Tall, grey-suited, clipboard in hand. She knocked briskly and entered. George was helping an orderly calculate shift differential pay. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the notebooks, visitors, organized chaos. Mr. Hayes, we need to discuss your discharge planning. George set down his pen. I'm listening. Given concerns about your cognitive status, our legal team recommends a formal guardianship assessment before you return home. The room went cold. Dr. Patel cleared him, I said steadily. Her smile was thin. Dr. Patel provided one opinion. Our liability protocols require comprehensive evaluation. She opened her clipboard. We've scheduled a court-appointed psychologist. 2 weeks from today. George's jaw tightened. What if we refuse? Then the hospital will petition for temporary guardianship. We have a duty of care, Mrs. Hayes. We can't discharge a potentially vulnerable patient without proper safeguards. She left. George stared at the door, his hands trembling again. Eleanor, what do we do now? I looked at our notebooks, our carefully built foundation. It wasn't enough. We fight harder. The financial test arrived 2 days later. I watched from my chair as the hospital accountant presented George with a budget scenario, managing household expenses with unexpected medical costs. Take your time, Mr. Hayes. George adjusted his glasses and worked steadily for 20 minutes. When he finished, the accountant reviewed his work, eyebrows rising. Very thorough. You've identified cost-saving measures I didn't anticipate. 40 years as an accountant, George said. After she left, I added her card to our growing file. Another witness. That evening, I spread everything across George's bedside table. Test results, testimonials, documentation. We need to organize this, I said. George nodded. A portfolio, proving I'm still me. We worked late, categorizing by type. Medical assessments, cognitive demonstrations, financial competency. By midnight, we had something irrefutable. Think it'll be enough? George asked. It has to be. Dr. Singh arrived next morning, flipping through our portfolio with clinical detachment. Impressive, but I notice inconsistencies. My stomach tightened. What inconsistencies? He pointed to George's medication log. You recorded 8:15. Nursing shows 8:23. I took it at 8:15, George said. The nurse recorded it later. The discrepancy raises questions about accuracy. Heat rose in my chest. An 8-minute difference questions his competency. In medical documentation, precision matters. Small errors indicate larger cognitive issues. Or nursing delays, George said quietly. Dr. Singh closed the portfolio. I'll review with the team, but understand, we can't ignore potential warning signs. After he left, George stared at his hands. They're looking for reasons to doubt me. Then we'll give them reasons to believe. The blow came that afternoon. The administrator returned with a social worker and someone new. This is Patricia Monroe. She's representing your daughter, Sarah. I went cold. We hadn't spoken to Sarah in months. Patricia smiled professionally. Sarah's concerned about her father's welfare and requested involvement in care decisions. George's voice tightened. Sarah didn't care when she moved to Arizona. Nevertheless, as next of kin, she has legal standing. My hands clenched. We're his family. Sarah's expressed concerns about potential undue influence. Patricia's tone was gentle but firm. We need to ensure all voices are heard. The administrator set down a folder. We've scheduled a meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. After they left, George's shoulders sagged. They're building a case, Eleanor. Every small mistake. They're looking for reasons. I took his hand. Then tomorrow, we give them none. The conference room felt cold. George and I sat across from Dr. Singh, the administrator, Patricia, and a laptop displaying Sarah's face. Dr. Patel arrived last, steadying my nerves. The administrator opened a folder. Mr. Hayes, we'll assess your capacity for independent decision-making. Sarah's voice crackled. Dad, I just want what's best. George's jaw tightened. Then trust I know what that is. Dr. Singh began questioning. George answered methodically. Medical conditions, medications, financial assets, every answer precise. Then Patricia spoke. Who manages your daily finances? I do. Eleanor and I review together. Have you considered what happens if your condition worsens? We have power of attorney. Eleanor has authority if I'm incapacitated. But right now you're making decisions alone? George hesitated. With Eleanor's input, Patricia made a note. So Mrs. Hayes influences your decisions. Dr. Patel leaned forward. Partnership isn't undue influence. It's marriage. Dr. Patel, we appreciate your perspective, but my perspective is medical fact. Mr. Hayes demonstrates full capacity. This feels like interrogation, not assessment. Silence fell. Sarah's voice cut through. I want to make sure Dad's protected. George's voice was quiet. Eleanor has protected me for 50 years. I don't need protection from her. The administrator closed her folder. We'll provide our recommendation within 48 hours. Dr. Singh spoke as we stood. One final question. If we determine you need assisted decision-making, would you accept it? George met his eyes. If medically necessary, yes, but not based on assumptions and distant relatives' fears. We walked out together. The victory felt hollow. We'd proven competency again, but the challenge hadn't ended. It had only begun. We started the next morning with tea and the crossword. Simple, but deliberate. George sat upright in bed, reading glasses perched on his nose, pencil moving across the grid with familiar precision. 7 across, I said. Financial gain, 6 letters. Profit. He didn't hesitate. I wrote it down. 11 down. Cognitive assessment. 4 letters. He smiled. Test. Or trap. Doesn't chum fit. We worked through the puzzle together, each answer a small demonstration. When the nurse arrived for morning vitals, George was explaining compound interest rates from memory. She paused. You used to be an accountant? 40 years, George said. Still remember most of it. After she left, I pulled out our notebook. Every interaction matters now. You think they're watching? I know they are. We established a schedule. Mornings for mental exercises, crosswords, Sudoku, reading aloud from the financial pages. George corrected market predictions with the confidence of someone who'd watched trends for decades. Afternoons, we reviewed our finances. George walked me through accounts, investments, insurance policies. I'd managed a classroom budget for years, but watching him work reminded me how sharp his mind truly was. Here, he said, pointing to a retirement account statement. See this transaction? Automated rebalancing. I set it up last year when tech stocks got volatile. I documented everything. Timestamps, decisions, rationale. You remember setting that up? I asked. May 14th. We'd just gotten back from visiting your sister. The detail was there. Clear. Undeniable. Evenings we read together. George chose poetry. Frost, Yeats, poets we'd loved when we were young. His voice stayed steady, pronunciation precise, even as he grew tired. When you are old and grey and full of sleep, he recited from memory. And nodding by the fire, take down this book. Remember when we used to read this at the cottage? Summer evenings on the porch, moths circling the lamp, George's voice carrying across the still water. I remember, I whispered. These routines rebuilt something, not just evidence for strangers' scrutiny, but connection between us. We'd spent 50 years building a life together. I wasn't about to let bureaucracy dismantle it. The social worker arrived on Thursday. Ms. Chen introduced herself with practiced warmth. I'm here to assess home readiness and support systems. She sat across from George, clipboard balanced on her knee. Mr. Hayes, walk me through your typical morning. George explained our routine: wake at 7, breakfast, medication, exercises. And Eleanor helps with all of this? We do it together. Ms. Chen made a note. Who decides what to eat? Usually Eleanor. She's the better cook. Another note. Who manages medication reminders? Eleanor sets them out. I take them. I watched her write. Each answer framed as dependency. Mr. Hayes, can you dress yourself independently? George's expression tightened. Yes. Do you choose your own clothes? Eleanor lays them out sometimes. So she makes those decisions. She helps. There's a difference. Ms. Chen's smile never wavered. Of course. I'm just documenting support levels. After she left, George was quiet. She made it sound like I can't function. That's what I'm documenting against, I said, showing him my notes. You answered clearly. She twisted context. Will anyone care about context? Dr. Patel will. The next evaluation came Monday. Different doctor, same process. Dr. Morrison asked George to perform basic cognitive tests, counting backward, spelling words, recalling lists. George complied, visibly frustrated. Then came the questions about daily living. Who manages your finances? I do. Independently. With Eleanor's partnership. Dr. Morrison glanced at his notes. Ms. Chen reported Eleanor makes most daily decisions. Ms. Chen misunderstood, George said. Did she? George's jaw set. Yes. Mr. Hayes, there's no shame in needing help. I'm not ashamed. I'm annoyed at being patronized. The room went still. Dr. Morrison set down his pen. Excuse me. George leaned forward. I had a minor stroke, not a lobotomy. I manage complex financial portfolios, read market analysis daily, and help my wife navigate investment decisions. I don't need someone half my age questioning whether I can pick out socks. Nobody's suggesting, yes, you are. Every question frames dependence. Eleanor and I are partners. We've made decisions together for 50 years. That's not incompetence, that's marriage. Dr. Morrison blinked. George continued, voice steady. I understand protocol. I respect medical oversight. But I won't accept assumptions based on incomplete assessments and social workers who twist collaboration into helplessness. Silence. Then Dr. Morrison closed his folder. Point taken, Mr. Hayes. After he left, George exhaled. Too much? I squeezed his hand. Perfect. That Friday, Mrs. Kapoor brought soup. Hospital visits? She asked, setting the container down. George's follow-ups. I didn't elaborate. She glanced at George, reading the financial section. He looks well. He is well. Mrs. Kapoor lowered her voice. Eleanor, I've known you both 20 years. George is sharper than most men half his age. If someone's suggesting otherwise, they're wrong. Something loosened in my chest. Would you write that down? Absolutely. Dr. Patel called Tuesday. I've asked Marcus Webb to consult, retired elder rights attorney. He'll review your situation pro bono through the Senior Advocacy Network. Thursday work? I gripped the phone. Thank you. Marcus Webb arrived exactly on time. 70-something, silver-haired, worn briefcase. He shook George's hand first. Marcus settled in. Dr. Patel briefed me, walked me through what happened. George explained everything. The stroke, hospital stay, rushed evaluation. When he finished, Marcus turned to me. Documentation? I showed him everything. Financial records, daily logs, neighbor observations, George's notes, Dr. Patel's assessment. Marcus reviewed methodically. Excellent foundation. We'll need formal affidavits and independent assessments from specialists outside the hospital system. How do we arrange that? I have contacts. Neuropsychologists, occupational therapists, financial planners. We'll build a comprehensive picture. George leaned forward. What are we fighting? Potentially guardianship proceedings. If the hospital claims incompetence, they could petition for court-appointed authority. We're preventing that. The weight settled over us. How strong is our position? I asked. Very. Most guardianship cases involve clear impairment. You're documenting the opposite. The challenge is bureaucratic inertia. So we need overwhelming evidence. Exactly. Affidavits came in. Mrs. Kapoor's first, then Mr. Chen, the library coordinator where George helped with tax workshops, our accountant, the pastor. Each statement built on the others. George's clarity, humor, sharp mind. People noticed. They'd been noticing all along. Dr. Patel arranged appointments. Both specialists conducted thorough evaluations, hours of testing, observation, interviews. Mr. Hayes demonstrates cognitive function consistent with healthy aging, the neuropsychologist, wrote. No evidence of impairment affecting decision-making. The occupational therapist's report was stronger. Patient manages complex financial tasks independently, demonstrates excellent problem solving, maintains autonomous daily living. Our network was growing, strangers becoming allies. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Then Linda called. "We need to talk about George. Mum's worried you're not thinking clearly." "It's handled," I said. "She thinks you're in denial about his condition." "George is competent." "Eleanor, he had a stroke. Multiple doctors confirm his competency." Silence. "Are you sure this isn't about not wanting to admit he needs help? You've always been independent. Sometimes love means accepting reality." My hands shook. "The reality is George is fine. I'm correcting the hospital's incomplete assessment. Or you're fighting because you can't accept losing control. This isn't about control. It's about protecting his rights. Unless you've reviewed the evidence or talked to his doctors, I need you to trust my judgment. I'm worried you're making this harder. Goodbye, Linda." I hung up. George appeared. "Your sister?" "She thinks I'm in denial." He took my hands. "You're not. She thinks I'm being selfish." "Eleanor, you're fighting for my voice to matter. That's not selfish. That's love." I looked at our joined hands. 50 years of partnership. "I won't let them silence you." "I know." The envelope arrived certified mail. Hospital letterhead, legal department return address. George opened it while I made coffee. The silence stretched too long. "Eleanor." His voice had that flat quality I'd learned to recognize when shock overrode everything else. I read over his shoulder. "Petition for limited guardianship. 6 pages of clinical language, legal citations, references to inconsistencies in financial documentation, and evidence of impaired judgment." They'd found the February bank statement where George had transposed 2 numbers. A tax form with a corrected date. 3 instances where his handwriting wavered during hospital stress. Minor errors, human errors. They were using them to strip away his autonomy. "They're really doing this," George said. "When's the hearing?" 3 weeks. I sat down before my legs gave out. 3 weeks to prove what I already knew, that my husband was competent, sharp, fully himself. 3 weeks before strangers decided whether he could control his own life. Dr. Patel arrived within an hour of my call. Marcus followed 20 minutes later. They spread the hospital's petition across our dining table. "This is thin," Marcus said, "but it's procedurally correct. They've followed protocol, cited legitimate concerns about cognitive fluctuation post-stroke. Based on clerical errors," I said, "which they're framing as evidence of diminished capacity." He tapped the 3rd page. "See how they word it? Pattern of inconsistency suggesting impaired executive function. It's manipulative, but it'll sound authoritative to a judge unfamiliar with the case." George's jaw tightened. "So they can just claim incompetence and the burden falls on me?" "Unfortunately, yes. Once they file, you have to prove competence. The system's designed to protect vulnerable adults. Sometimes it overcorrects." "I'm not vulnerable. I'm 73 and recovering from a minor stroke." "I know. We're going to make the court see that." The next days blurred into preparation. Marcus outlined strategy, while Dr. Patel coordinated additional medical assessments. George needed to be evaluated by independent specialists who could testify credibly about his cognitive function. We scheduled neuropsychological testing, functional assessments, financial competency evaluations. Each appointment meant hours of questions, puzzles, memory exercises. George answered patiently, but I saw the humiliation building. "They're treating me like a child," he said after the third session. "They're documenting the truth. It doesn't feel like truth. It feels like proving I'm human." I had no answer for that. Dr. Patel helped us prepare testimony. She sat at our kitchen table, coaching George through potential questions. "They'll ask about the February bank error. What happened?" I transposed the account numbers. I caught it the next day and corrected it. "Why did you make the error?" George hesitated. "I was tired. Eleanor had been at the hospital with her mother. I was distracted." "Perfect. That's normal human behavior, not cognitive impairment." She turned to me. "Eleanor, they may question your motives. You'll need to explain why you're fighting this." "Because it's wrong." "Be more specific, personal." I thought about it. "Because George has earned the right to make his own decisions. Because partnership means protecting each other's dignity, not taking it away out of fear." Dr. Patel nodded. "Remember that. When they try to frame you as controlling or in denial, return to partnership and dignity." Marcus brought draft affidavits for neighbors and friends. Each needed to be notarized, precise, factual. Mrs. Kapoor's statement was particularly strong. "I have observed Mr. Hayes manage complex household finances, engage in substantive political discussions, and demonstrate problem-solving abilities superior to many younger adults in our community." Mr. Chen's focused on George's volunteer tax assistance, detailed methodical work requiring sharp analytical skills. The accountant testified to George's financial acumen, the pastor to his leadership on church finance committee. We were building a wall of evidence, brick by careful brick. But doubt crept in during quiet moments. What if it wasn't enough? What if the hospital's institutional authority outweighed individual testimony? What if a judge decided that caution meant guardianship, that protecting George required controlling him? That evening, George sat at his desk, reviewing financial records, making sure every number aligned, every date correct. His hands trembled slightly. "George," he looked up, "even if we lose, you're still you. They can't change that. They can decide I don't get to prove it. Then we'll keep proving it anyway, every day, together." He pulled me close. I felt his heartbeat, steady despite everything. "I'm scared," he whispered. "Me too." We stood there, holding each other, while the clock ticked toward a courtroom neither of us had ever imagined facing. The pre-court review took place in a windowless conference room. Fluorescent light buzzed overhead, turning everyone's skin pallid. Hospital Administrator Brennan sat at the head, flanked by 2 attorneys. Dr. Patel sat beside us. Marcus faced them, briefcase open, documents arranged precisely. "Thank you for this informal review," Brennan began. "We believe resolution without court intervention serves everyone's interests." "Then withdraw the petition," Marcus said. "Not feasible. Our duty of care requires protective measures when cognitive impairment threatens welfare." "Mr. Hayes hasn't demonstrated impairment." Brennan slid a folder across. "Our records indicate otherwise. Inconsistent responses, financial errors, medication confusion." "He'd just suffered a stroke," Dr. Patel interrupted. "Temporary disorientation is normal. Subsequent evaluations show complete recovery." A hospital attorney leaned forward. "Dr. Patel, your involvement began after the crisis. You weren't present when these concerns emerged." "I've reviewed those records thoroughly. The assessment was rushed and incomplete." "Or thorough and prescient. Elder patients often present well in controlled settings." George's hand tightened on mine. You're proposing to strip a man's legal autonomy based on 20-minute interview, Marcus said, voice edged. We're proposing appropriate oversight. Guardianship isn't oversight. It's removal of fundamental rights. Let's not be dramatic, Brennan said. Guardianship can be limited in scope. Any scope removes Mr. Hayes's agency, Dr. Patel said. Every assessment since contradicts your position. I pulled out my portfolio, 3 months of documentation. George managed our budget without error during recovery, I said. Coordinated appointments, maintained correspondence, assisted neighbors with taxes. I have records of everything. Brennan barely glanced. Mrs. Hayes, spouses often enable declining partners out of loyalty rather than objectivity. The words landed like a slap. You're suggesting I'm in denial? Professional medical assessment carries more weight than a wife's wishful thinking. Heat flooded my face. George stood abruptly, chair scraping. Don't speak to her that way. Brennan looked surprised. Mr. Hayes, please, you talk about my welfare like I'm not here. You dismiss evidence that doesn't fit your narrative. You patronize my wife for refusing a demonstrably wrong diagnosis. We're trying to help. You're covering the hospital's liability at my expense. Sharp silence fell. The attorney's expression hardened. Then formal proceedings appear necessary. We'll see you in court. Marcus met my eyes. This was the moment we'd been building toward. Fine, I said. We'll present our evidence to a judge, all of it. Brennan stood. Mrs. Hayes, litigation is expensive, stressful. At your age, at our age, we know exactly what's worth fighting for. We walked out together, George's hand steady in mine. Behind us, an attorney murmured about difficult cases. George stopped at the elevator. They really think they're right. That's what terrifies me. Then we make sure the judge sees differently. Marcus pushed the lobby button. Hearings in 3 weeks. We use every day. George nodded, face grey. I saw it then, the true weight. Not just bureaucracy, but a system designed to decide that safety mattered more than dignity. I need air, George said at the parking lot. We stood beside the car, spring sun warm, traffic humming past. What if we lose? George asked. I gave him the truth. Then we appeal and keep fighting. He pulled me close. I felt him trembling, not from weakness, from the terrible courage it takes to fight when outcomes aren't certain, when all you have is evidence, allies, and stubborn refusal to surrender. 3 weeks, he whispered. Between the parking lot and home, I felt something shift inside me. Fear still lived there, coiled and cold. But alongside it, something fiercer, a determination that had nothing to do with hope and everything to do with bone-deep refusal. They would not take this from us without the fight of their institutional lives. The courtroom smelled of old wood and floor polish, that institutional scent that reminded me of every parent-teacher conference I'd ever attended. Judge Margaret Thornton presided from the bench, 50-something with steel-grey hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. To our left sat the hospital's legal team, 3 attorneys in identical navy suits, Brennan beside them, looking professionally concerned. Behind us, I caught glimpses of familiar faces, neighbors, Dr. Patel, 2 of George's former colleagues. On the other side, a distant cousin of George's I'd met twice in 40 years, invited by the hospital as a concerned family member. Marcus opened his briefcase with practiced precision. George sat beside me, wearing his good suit, the one from our grandson's wedding. You ever notice how courtrooms make everyone feel guilty, even when they've done nothing wrong? Your Honor, the hospital's lead attorney began. This case concerns protective intervention for an elderly individual experiencing cognitive decline. Our medical professionals identified clear signs of impairment following a cerebrovascular event. Objection to characterization, Marcus said calmly. Mr. Hayes's attending neurologist disputes that assessment. Judge Thornton made a note. Proceed, counselor. Keep it factual. The hospital attorney continued, outlining their case. Minor stroke, initial confusion, inconsistent responses. The familiar narrative we'd been fighting for months, dressed in legal language that made George sound like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be heard. When Marcus stood, he placed my portfolio on the evidence table. Your Honor, we've prepared comprehensive documentation demonstrating Mr. Hayes's full cognitive capacity. Mrs. Hayes? I approached the bench, pulse hammering, 3 months of work organized into labeled sections. This contains daily logs from George's recovery period, I said. Financial management, appointment coordination, correspondence. Each entry is dated and detailed. I opened to the budget spreadsheet. Color-coded, cross-referenced, not a calculation error in sight. George maintained our household finances throughout recovery, balanced accounts, paid bills on schedule, even helped our neighbor with tax preparation. The hospital attorney leaned forward. Mrs. Hayes, with respect, spousal testimony lacks objectivity. I have third-party affidavits, I said, from the neighbor George assisted, from our bank manager confirming account activity, from former colleagues who maintained regular contact. Marcus handed the judge a tablet. We've also compiled video evidence, daily conversations, problem-solving exercises, interactions demonstrating full comprehension and reasoning. Judge Thornton scrolled through. I watched her face for any sign of response. Nothing. Your Honor, the hospital attorney said, initial impairment is well documented. Brief, lucid periods don't negate underlying decline. Objection, Marcus said. 3 months of consistent cognitive function isn't a brief period. Sustained. Dr. Patel was called next. She approached with quiet authority. Dr. Patel, you evaluated Mr. Hayes how many times? Marcus asked. 6 comprehensive assessments over 12 weeks. Cognitive testing, memory evaluation, executive function analysis. Mr. Hayes scored within normal ranges for his age group on every measure. And the hospital's initial assessment? Incomplete. Conducted during acute medical stress, without proper cognitive baseline, and concluded before standard protocol allowed. The hospital attorney rose. Dr. Patel, you began treating Mr. Hayes after the critical period. You weren't present when impairment was evident. I reviewed complete medical records. The so-called impairment consisted of temporary confusion immediately post-stroke, medically expected and fully resolved. Yet you're asking this court to override multiple medical professionals. I'm asking the court to consider current evidence over rushed conclusions. Judge Thornton held up a hand. Let's hear from Mr. Hayes himself. George stood. I saw him gather himself, that teacher's posture from decades of classroom authority. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, can you explain your understanding of these proceedings? The hospital wants to declare me legally incompetent, based on confusion I experienced while having a stroke. His voice steady. They're using my worst moment to define my entire capacity. And you dispute their assessment? I dispute assessment made in crisis without follow-up. I've provided months of evidence demonstrating normal function. I manage finances, maintain relationships, make reasoned decisions. If that's incompetence, half the population needs guardians. A brief smile flickered across the judge's face. The hospital attorney stood again. Your Honor, elder patients often present well in structured settings. Real-world function may differ significantly. I live in the real world, George said. Not a structured setting. I've demonstrated competence there for 73 years. Mr. Hayes, please let counsel speak, Judge Thornton said, but her tone held no rebuke. Marcus presented the final piece, independent psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Patel's colleague, confirming full capacity. The hospital attorney challenged methodology, questioned timing, implied bias. I watched the judge's expression shift from neutral to something harder to read. Finally, she set down her pen. We'll take a 30-minute recess. I need to review this evidence properly. The gavel fell. The hallway felt smaller than it should have. George and I stood near the water fountain. Marcus had disappeared. Dr. Patel was reviewing notes. Eleanor, George's nephew Daniel, approached, wife trailing behind. Uncle George, we need to discuss what happens if this doesn't go your way. George stiffened. It will. But if it doesn't, then Daniel glanced at his wife. We've been discussing assisted living near us. Take pressure off Eleanor. You ever notice how people use your name like a weapon? We're managing fine, I said. Are you, though? Christine stepped closer. This situation wouldn't exist if things were fine. George's hand found mine, squeezed. This exists because a doctor made assumptions, I said. We're correcting them. We're family. We're trying to help, Daniel sighed. Then help by believing him. The hospital administrator appeared, clipboard in hand. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, whatever the judge decides, our position comes from genuine concern. George's jaw tightened. Your concern feels like control. We follow established protocols. Your protocols nearly erased my autonomy based on incomplete evidence, George said, voice level but furious. That's not care. That's convenience. Her expression hardened. Emotional responses like this demonstrate the volatility we've documented. Defending yourself isn't volatility, I cut in. It's self-preservation. She looked at me with that dismissal reserved for women they consider too old to matter. Mrs. Hayes, sometimes love makes us protective to the point of denial. My stomach dropped. She'd weaponized our marriage against us. Excuse me. A young nurse in scrubs stood nearby, hesitant but determined. I recognized her from George's recovery. I was there during Mr. Hayes's recovery. I observed him every day for 2 weeks, she said. The administrator's face went blank. Nurse Chen. He wasn't confused. He asked about medications, remembered conversations, helped other patients. He's one of the sharpest people I've met on that floor. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. That's kind, but observation without clinical training, the administrator began. I'm finishing my nurse practitioner degree, Nurse Chen said. I know cognitive impairment. This isn't it. The administrator's mouth pressed thin. We'll discuss this later. I'm saying what I saw, the truth. She met my eyes. My throat tightened. Thank you. She nodded and left. We should get back inside, Daniel said. The administrator departed without a word. George turned to me, eyes tired but determined. You're really doing this. We're doing this, I corrected. You and me. He smiled, small but real. 60 years and you still surprise me. Keeps things interesting. Marcus beckoned us back. Ready, Bill? George asked. I squeezed his hand. Ready. We walked past Daniel's frown, past the administrator's rigid posture, past everyone's doubt. Judge Thornton was already at the bench. I took my seat next to George. Our hands stayed linked. The judge looked up. "Bailiff, we're ready to resume." Silence fell. George's fingers tightened around mine. Not weakness, but the vibration of everything riding on what came next. Judge Thornton opened the case folder. Judge Thornton adjusted his glasses. "Dr. Patel, you may present your findings." Dr. Patel rose, carrying a thin folder and nothing else. No dramatics, just competence. "Your Honor, I conducted a comprehensive neurological evaluation of Mr. George Hayes over 3 sessions, totaling 7 hours." Her voice was steady, professional. "The initial assessment that prompted this hearing was based on a 15-minute encounter during acute medical stress." The hospital's lawyer shifted in his seat. "My evaluation included the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, executive function tests, memory recall exercises, and real-world problem-solving scenarios," Dr. Patel continued. "Mr. Hayes scored within normal ranges for his age group across all metrics. More significantly, he demonstrated superior organizational skills, financial acumen, and decision-making capacity." She opened the folder. "I observed him manage household finances, plan medical appointments, and engage in complex reasoning about his care preferences. These aren't theoretical exercises. They're daily demonstrations of competence." "Dr. Patel, the hospital's position cites moments of confusion," the judge said. "Post-stroke confusion is common and temporary. The key question is, does the patient recover? Mr. Hayes did, completely." She looked directly at the judge. "Declaring someone incompetent based on transient symptoms during acute illness is premature and unjust." The hospital lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Dr. Patel's involvement came after the fact. Our physician made a reasonable assessment given the circumstances." "A reasonable assessment requires sufficient observation," Dr. Patel said, voice sharp but controlled. 15 minutes isn't sufficient. That's not medicine. That's assumption." I felt George's hand tighten. "Thank you, Dr. Patel," the judge said. "Mrs. Hayes, I understand you've compiled documentation." My heart hammered. This was it. I stood, legs shaky, but voice clear. "Yes, Your Honor." Marcus handed me the portfolio. Weeks of work, every careful detail. After the hospital's initial assessment, I began documenting George's daily activities. I opened to the first section. Financial records showing his accurate bookkeeping, medical appointment logs he maintained independently, correspondence demonstrating clear reasoning. I showed the judge George's handwritten notes, neat columns, careful calculations. I also recorded conversations, not to trap him, but to prove what I saw every day, a man fully in control of his mind. The judge studied the pages. "This is quite thorough." "George taught me to be thorough," I said. "He's an accountant. Details matter." "Mrs. Hayes, some might argue you're biased," the hospital lawyer said. "I'm his wife. Of course I'm biased. But bias doesn't erase facts." I met his eyes. "Everything in this portfolio can be verified independently." The judge nodded. "Mr. Hayes, I'd like to hear from you directly." George stood slowly, dignified. "Mr. Hayes, can you explain your current financial management practices?" "I manage our retirement accounts, monthly budget, and bill payments," George said, voice steady. "We have 3 investment accounts diversified across stocks, bonds, and a money market fund. Our monthly expenses average $1,200. I reconcile our statements every month." "Do you make these decisions independently?" "Eleanor and I discuss major purchases, but day-to-day management is mine." Has been for 50 years. The hospital lawyer stood. Mr. Hayes, when you were admitted, you couldn't remember the date. I'd just had a stroke, George said simply. I also couldn't feel my left hand, both condition resolved. But in that moment, I was terrified and disoriented. Wouldn't you be? George's voice stayed calm. But fear and confusion during a medical crisis don't equal permanent incompetence. Silence. I've made every important decision in my life with clarity and intention, George continued, including the decision to fight this. Nobody gets to take that from me because of one bad day. You could have heard a pin drop. The judge leaned back. I'd like to hear final statements. Hospital first. The hospital's lawyer stood, straightening his jacket, professional mask firmly in place. Your Honor, the hospital acted with appropriate caution, given Mr. Hayes's presentation during acute medical distress. Our physician followed standard protocols for assessing cognitive capacity in elderly patients experiencing neurological events. Standard protocols. As if George were a checklist. We maintain that the initial assessment, while perhaps incomplete, was made in good faith to protect Mr. Hayes's interests. However, in light of Dr. Patel's comprehensive evaluation and Mrs. Hayes's documentation, we acknowledge that guardianship may not be necessary at this time. May not be necessary. Not an apology, not an admission of error, just careful legal language. He sat down. The judge turned to Marcus. Mr. Chen? Marcus stood, and I saw why Dr. Patel had recommended him. No theatrics, just quiet authority. Your Honor, this case represents a failure of assumptions over observation. Mr. Hayes was judged incompetent based on a snapshot of his worst moment, not the full picture of his capabilities. That's not protection. It's overreach. He gestured to our evidence. Mrs. Hayes didn't just claim her husband was competent. She proved it through meticulous documentation, expert testimony, and Mr. Hayes's own clear participation in this process. The real question isn't whether Mr. Hayes can manage his affairs. It's whether we trust elderly individuals to maintain autonomy even when they experience temporary medical setbacks. George's hand found mine under the table. Denying this guardianship petition isn't just about one couple, Marcus continued. It's about affirming that competency isn't determined by age or a single bad day, but by sustained capacity to reason, decide, and participate in one's own life. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes have demonstrated all three. He sat down. The courtroom went silent. The judge reviewed documents, her face unreadable. Every second stretched into eternity. Finally, she looked up. I've reviewed all evidence presented, including Dr. Patel's comprehensive neurological evaluation, Mrs. Hayes's documentation, and Mr. Hayes's direct testimony. She paused. The petition for guardianship is denied. Relief hit like a wave. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering the hospital to amend its assessment to reflect Mr. Hayes's demonstrated competency. A 15-minute evaluation during acute medical stress is insufficient grounds for such serious legal action. George's shoulders dropped. I hadn't realized how tense he'd been holding himself. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, you have every right to manage your affairs as you see fit. This court recognizes Mr. Hayes's capacity and autonomy. She looked directly at us. I commend your persistence and thoroughness in defending those rights. The gavel came down. It was over. Marcus turned, smiling. Congratulations. Dr. Patel squeezed my shoulder as she passed. Well done. People moved around us, lawyers packing briefcases, court staff shuffling papers, but I only saw George. "We did it," he said quietly. "You did it," I corrected. "You showed them exactly who you are." Outside the courtroom, neighbors who'd come to support us offered hugs and handshakes. The young nurse who'd testified during the recess smiled shyly. "I knew they were wrong about you, Mr. Hayes." Then I saw Margaret, George's niece, approaching hesitantly. "Aunt Eleanor, Uncle George, I'm sorry." Her voice was thick. "I should have trusted you both. I was scared, and I let that fear make me doubt." George nodded slowly. "Fear does that." "You were protecting him the way you thought best," I added. "We understand." She hugged us both, tears on her cheeks. By the time we reached the parking lot, exhaustion was settling in. The good kind, after a long battle, finally won. George stopped beside our car, looking back at the courthouse. "Penny for your thoughts?" I asked. "I was thinking about all those mornings documenting everything. Felt silly sometimes, proving I could still add numbers." "Not silly, necessary." "No." He turned to me. "It was more than that. It reminded me who I am, not just for them, for myself." The afternoon sun caught the silver in his hair. 73 years of living, thinking, deciding. Nobody got to erase that. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing me when they didn't." "Always have, George. Always will." We stood there a moment, two people who'd just reclaimed what should never have been questioned: dignity, agency, partnership. "Let's go home," I said. He smiled. "Best idea I've heard all week." The house looked different when we walked through the door. Same worn welcome mat, same crooked picture frame in the hallway, same kitchen table where this whole thing started. But everything felt lighter somehow. George set his briefcase down, the one he'd carried to court, and let out a long breath. "Tea?" I asked. "Please." I filled the kettle while he settled into his usual chair, the one by the window where morning light pools across the newspaper. He picked up yesterday's crossword, studied it for a moment, then reached for his pen. 17 across, he said. 7 letters. Persistent advocate. I smiled. Fighter. Doesn't fit. He tapped the pen against his chin. Ah, paladin. The kettle whistled. I poured 2 cups, added his preferred half-spoon of sugar, and brought them to the table. The steam curled between us, familiar and warm. "You know what I want to do tomorrow?" George asked. "What's that?" "Balance the checkbook, review our investments, maybe call the bank about that new savings account we've been considering." "Revolutionary," he grinned. "Exactly. Boring, ordinary, absolutely revolutionary." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Over the next few days, George returned to his routines with renewed purpose. He organized receipts, updated our budget spreadsheet, sorted through mail with meticulous care. Tasks that used to be invisible now felt like small declarations of independence. I watched him work, remembering how the young doctor had questioned these exact abilities. How wrong she'd been, how close we'd come to losing this. But I also knew we couldn't live in that fear. So while George managed finances at the kitchen table, I took our portfolio, every document, every affidavit, every careful note, and filed it away in a labeled box on the top shelf of our closet. Not forgotten, but not constantly present either, just in case. But not center stage. "What are you doing up there?" George called. "Putting things away." "Need help?" I smiled at the ceiling. "I've got it." That afternoon we sat in the garden, George read poetry aloud. Frost, then Oliver, then a few stanzas of Yeats, while I dead-headed the roses. The words washed over me, gentle and familiar. When he finished, I said, "Read that last one again." He did, his voice steady and clear. Later, Mrs. Chen from next door stopped by with a casserole. "Heard the good news," she said, beaming. "Never doubted you two for a second." George accepted the dish with gracious humor. "Thank you, Helen. That means a lot." After she left, he turned to me. "She absolutely doubted us. Completely." We both laughed. That evening, Marcus called to confirm the hospital had filed the amended assessment. "It's official," he said. "George Hayes, fully competent, legally recognized, case closed." "Thank you," I told him, "for everything." "You did the hard part, Eleanor. I just showed up at the end." Maybe, but showing up mattered. The next morning, George made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, without incident. No dizziness, no confusion, just Tuesday breakfast in our kitchen. I watched him move through the familiar motions and thought about all the mornings ahead. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but ours to decide. "Eleanor?" He glanced over his shoulder. "You're staring. Just appreciating the view?" He shook his head, smiling. 73 years and you still surprise me." "Good. Keeps things interesting." Later that week, Dr. Patel called to invite us to a small gathering at the community center, a casual get-together she'd organized. "Nothing formal," she assured me. "Just neighbors, allies, people who care. Thought it might be nice to celebrate properly." I looked at George, who nodded. "We'll be there," I said. Saturday afternoon arrived bright and clear. George wore his good shirt, the blue one that brought out his eyes. I chose the dress I'd worn to our grandson's wedding last year. Practical, but nice. The community center's rec room was decorated simply, folding tables with snacks, a banner someone had made reading "Welcome Home," George and Eleanor, balloons in cheerful colors. People milled about, neighbors we'd known for decades, hospital volunteers who'd witnessed George's competence firsthand, Marcus and Dr. Patel chatting near the punch bowl. Mrs. Chen waved us over immediately. "There they are!" Others gathered round. Handshakes, hugs, quiet words of congratulation. The young nurse who'd testified approached shyly. "Mr. Hayes, I just wanted to say, watching you stand up for yourself gave me courage to speak up too, about other patients. Thank you." George's voice was gentle. "Thank you for seeing what others missed."